and press record. We can get going. Wow. Thank you all for making the time to join this call today on how food hubs can respond to the USDA CFAP purchasing and distribution program. Encourage you to turn on your videos and to please mute yourself if you're not talking. My name is Elizabeth Atwell. I'm a project manager with the Wallace Center, coming to you live from Durham, North Carolina. I'm joined today by several members of the Wallace Center team who will be helping to facilitate. Maybe give a wave. And thanks to the team for mobilizing at truly lightning speed to put together this call, and to all of you for joining with such short notice. If you can access your chat box, if you're on your computer, I'd encourage you to type in there and say hello and introduce yourselves in that chat box and let us know your name and where you're calling in from. So we are here today to talk about the USDA CFAP purchase and distribution program. If you're like me, last Friday evening, just as you were finally closing your computer and maybe unwinding and having that Friday evening glass of wine, you might have caught wind that USDA had just made some big announcements about their coronavirus food assistance program. That press release I just put in the chat box. So this, the CFAP program is a multifaceted program. It includes the provision of direct support to farmers and ranchers. But a key part of this program and what we're going to be focusing on today is the USDA purchase and distribution program. Through this, the US government is going to be purchasing $3 billion worth of domestic fresh produce, dairy, and meat products. That comes out to about $100 million of each product category each month from, quote, food distributors that will package these products into a pre-approved box to be distributed to food banks and other nonprofit and community organizations serving those people that are dealing with food insecurity right now. More information is coming out seemingly by the hour, and there's a ton of questions, particularly on how those of us working in local and regional value chains can take advantage of this program. USDA just hosted about an hour ago an informational call to give an overview of the program, and it was a lot of information. For those of you who weren't on that call or just need a little bit of help making sense of it, we did take some notes, which again, I'm posting here in the chat box. USDA will be sending out a recording of that call soon, and the RFP, we've been told, will be released on Friday. I think the USDA folks on the call said there was 540 questions in the Q&A box. So obviously we have a lot of questions, and we at the Wallace Center don't have the answers. We can't speak on behalf of USDA or answer technical questions about the program or about the RFP. But what we're hoping to do here on this call is to surface and distill your questions and your concerns and your recommendations so that we can share those back to USDA. So this call is supposed to be a venue for us to list out our questions and our concerns and to draw upon each other's wisdom and knowledge to make recommendations for how we can support each other and support our sector in taking advantage of this program. So before we jump into that conversation, just a few things to note. Yes, this call is being recorded. We're also going to be taking notes live in a Google Doc, which is here in the chat box. You'll see on the top of that document an area for questions, recommendations, and then another for asks and offers. Please feel free to contribute to this directly by just typing in the Google Doc. And these notes and the recording of this call is going to be shared out after the call. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Ellie Baumstein, who's going to give a quick overview of the massive amounts of information that we just learned in the USDA meeting that just happened. Ellie?
Okay. Can you all see a very text-heavy PowerPoint slide? Yes, okay. Yeah, apologies for the graphic design failings here. This is just going to be a really brief overview of what we have sort of been able to glean and learn from reading the USDA's press release that came out last week, and just some other research we've been able to do, and the USDA call that they just had this afternoon. As Elizabeth said, we are not experts. This is what we've been able to pull together. USDA is going to be releasing a lot more detailed information, including that RFP, hopefully by the end of this week. But we just wanted to do like a quick overview of what we understand and what we think this program is going to look like, and not answer super detailed or technical questions. But yeah, just let you guys get up to speed on what we know at least. So the goal here is that USDA is partnering with regional and local food distributors who have been significantly impacted by COVID-19 to buy a ton of domestically produced produce, dairy, and meat. This is going to look like at least $100 million a month within each of these categories. They're then going to be asking these distributors to create boxes of this food and then partner with a nonprofit, a food bank, someone distributing food to people in need in their communities, and giving them these boxes of domestically produced food, dairy, and meat. They do have a sort of long list that they shared of products that they're particularly interested in. I think a lot of it is based on what is in surplus right now. We've all seen horrible stories of farmers plowing back their fields under and dumping milk. So USDA is really trying to support some of those commodities specifically. And it's a really long list that I think is going to be in that RFP and that they read out during that call. But what they really want is for people to be able to take these boxes home. So when they say box, they weren't even necessarily saying that it needed to be like a cardboard box. They just want something with a variety of domestically produced food that someone can take off the trunk and into the truck, was their phrasing. So something that the average person could take home with them and eat. The plan that they shared with us is that they're going to release this RFP solicitation on Friday. There's going to be a week turnaround for the application to get in. Another week, they're going to let people know who they're giving the bids to, and then hoping that they can actually start distributing this food May 15th. So we're talking about the fastest that I've ever seen USDA do anything. So it's all going to happen really quickly. And with that in mind, when you win, if you win this solicitation, you're entering into a federal contract with USDA, which means a lot of regulations, a lot of reporting requirements, a lot of paperwork. You're really, going to be directly working with the US government. So that's the very broad strokes of how we understand this program is going to look. Again, there's a lot more detail in that webinar. I would recommend watching it because they do go into a lot of detail about what the application itself is going to look like. And I think that's probably going to be everyone's best bet at getting ready before the RFP is actually released. They haven't released a recording of that yet, but they said they would. And Annalena, who is a note-taking goddess, took really detailed notes of that call, so you can look those over. I believe Elizabeth shared the link to them already. So that is a lot of information. We're all sort of still trying to process all the details here, but we did kind of want to get a sense from the audience, A, if I made any glaring errors based on what you all have been hearing, and B, sort of what's striking people, the ways that the local food system is pretty well positioned to respond to this kind of thing. So we're asking for if anybody has any clarifying points or anything to add first. And you can either put those in the chat box, or in Zoom, you can go down to participants and there's a way to raise your hand and we can see who's raising their hand. And you can unmute and we can hear from you directly.
Hey, Ellie, I'll chime in. And I think something that really stood out to me in the call was when they were talking about the components of the technical proposal. And that the first part is a narrative where you're talking about how your procurement is going to be supporting American agriculture, describing your role, supporting U.S. Ag, and how it supports the facilitation of local and regional agricultural markets. So they specifically called out local and regional in that technical proposal component. And I know that, everyone on this call already has that kind of language put together. So I think that that's a strength, and that's something that we can really lean on stuff that we already have in the mix. That might be more difficult for some of the broadliners to develop.
This is a good point from Marilyn Sideker about the 5 types of boxes, which are fresh fruit and veg, dairy, pre-cooked meat, which we're kind of waiting to get more clarity on what that means, fluid milk, or a combo of any of the above. So those are the categories that they're really focused on. There was not a lot of emphasis on other types of value-added products. It seemed to be whole fruit and veg, fluid milk, probably processed dairy. I think you guys, did they say anything about cheese? Or a combination, and fluid milk. So it doesn't seem like they're really interested in any value-added products.
Ellie, it does look like there are some people with their hands raised. I don't know if you wanted to.
I can't see that while I'm sharing my screen.
All right, Gabriel, I think I'll help monitor these hand raised here.
Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Gabe with Working Landscapes in Warren County, North Carolina. So I was trying to hear the USDA call past my kids, maybe like some of you, and so I have a few questions. Maybe you guys gleaned something. So if I understand correctly, this is going to be a contract for an organization who then will distribute food, pre-approved food products to 501c3 nonprofit recipient organizations who will then distribute them to end consumers. Correct? Does that correspond to what you guys were getting from this?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
So then the question for me was to understand better what categories of organizations they're looking for to be the contractees, the actual applicants, versus the organizations that might be, which might be some of us in this call, who might be best positioned to be the next tier of entity, which is the 501c3 that receives the product from the contractees and distribute it to the end consumers. And which of those 2 types of entities is the one that's boxing it up? Is it the contractee, or could it be boxed up at the recipient site? And my other question is, you say that local and regional was given priority, but then they also mentioned regions that are vast, like they divided the country into 7 gigantic regions, right? So most of us in local food don't serve regions at that scale. So do you have any sense of whether this solicitation is going to favor sort of mega regions, or whether we can put together viable proposals at fairly small geographies? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I can just jump in here real quick. They did mention that one of the reasons for having the distributors develop this was so that because of the lack of volunteers at some of the nonprofits and the lack of capacity, it was just easier to have a from truck to trunk model where the box was already created and ready to just be handed off from the distributor to that nonprofit. So it's really, sounds like the onus is on the distributor to do that. And then your second question, you can apply to support a part of a region. So it doesn't have to be supporting a full region. If that help answers it a little bit.
Right, but do you think that small geographies will be competitive? Do we have any sense of that?
I don't think we have a sense of that. I don't think we have a sense, but I think they're looking for established partnerships and a track record of doing this. And if you can show that, I think they're looking for you, so to speak. You know what I mean? I think back to the contractual piece, I think the contract is directly with people that distribute, companies that distribute, food hubs and others that already distribute product, and they do that in relationship with a nonprofit. They referenced a number of times food banks, didn't really mention any other nonprofits, but the press release mentioned, I think, left some flexibility on what those nonprofits are. So we're hoping that there is flexibility and it's beyond just food banks, although food banks are important.
I think that's right.
Thank you.
John, this is Jan Tusick, and I did ask a question on the webinar about the role a producer cooperative could play in this. They are not a nonprofit structure, but some of them that we are, like Link Food is on this call. They are distributing product, but it seems to me the nonprofit relationship is going to be very important because of the possible experience some nonprofits have in federal contracting, such as our center. We run numerous federal programs through here. So I think we want to think about that, about how these partnerships really are linked together, bring those capacities to the table to move, some really exciting opportunities forward in very regional food system approaches. Yeah,
great point, Jan. Thank you.
Jeff Foltz here from Northwest Ag Business Center. One of the things that David Tuckwiller said was that those that had existing relationships with farmers, processors, distribution, and nonprofits really have a structure that's going to be favorable to this grant. So I think food hubs really are in a pretty good position to be able to make this happen. But I'm stunned at the compressed timeline. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So, Annalena, were there others with their hands up, or do you want to move on?
I see a good question from Gwenail about the pricing, and I believe that, which I think Devin might have answered just above it, which is that the USDA is going to set the prices by region. Is that what other folks heard for the products, for the commodities?
Yeah, that's what I heard on the call. There is one more hand raised from Wally. I don't know if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to plug, I don't know of the accuracy of this information, but I'm thinking on the cooked meat side that it could be a salami, something more shelf stable that might fit into this category, whether it's pork products that have gone through the fermentation stage. That would be my first thought, is how, if we do want to start putting together applications that work beyond our local cities and helping strengthen what we're going into this very short timeline with, I'd love to hear from people both within my region of the Great Plains or Midwest, as well as how other people are maybe partnering on a larger scale that would help strengthen their application.
I mean, I think to that point, I don't think we can connect you directly right now. I mean, maybe others are more clever than I am at that in the moment, but I do think that this opportunity calls for that kind of collaboration and partnership across hubs, towns, and areas, in part because of efficiencies, in part because of filling gaps, and in part because it probably would get the most people addressed, which is what they're after. So awesome. Snaps to that.
Thank you for putting together this call so fast as well. It's very amazing just to be able to jump on with all of these great partners.
Thanks for helping us figure this all out. Okay, any last questions or clarifying points or things that people noticed that seem important that we haven't mentioned yet?
I do just want to say that there are a lot of great questions coming in through the chat box as well, and we will try to answer those as best as we can, but we'll also pass these along to USDA, and hopefully that the RFP, when that comes out, will have some more clarifying points in there too. Yeah. So sorry for not being able to get to all of those right now.
And a quick plug, I'm trying to get as many of these questions into this Google Doc where we're capturing this, but again, knowing we can't get to everything, I encourage you all to just direct add your questions here.
There was one in there I just want to point out. There was the question around, will it apply to the tribes? And I don't think we know that. I didn't hear anything on the call. That was one of my questions that I tapped into them. So hopefully they'll get back to us ASAP. So I think that's an important piece.
They really didn't say anything about end users and kept the, that was kind of odd in terms of what any kind of eligibility requirements or anything on the recipient end. So no information there. And I also I want to point out Kathy Davies' comment here that they said food safety should be mentioned in the proposal, but they also haven't gone into any of the product requirements, whether GAP certification is going to be a component or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
At least that I heard or saw in any of the description of the program.
They did mention that because it was a federal procurement program, that the procedures and requirements will have to follow those federal guidelines. I don't know if that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone have a sense of any of those federal procurement guidelines? Is there any kind of competitive pricing that would be included in that?
I don't think we know that. I think what they did say was that, and they almost were apologetic that this has to be federal contracting and there are certain parameters and regulations. On the other hand, they said this is really outside of their normal way of doing things. So I think there's going to be some of both there. I didn't hear any price competitive. I heard that they're going to try to set the prices and then it's going to be up to the bidders to say whether they can meet it or not within those price parameters. At least that's what I heard.
That's a bit of a concern.
Yeah. I mean, I know there was one example out of New York. It was a totally separate, but it was the city of New York that was contracting that let the bidder set the price, that let the food hub set the price. And it was a very good price.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's any consolence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in order to give more folks an opportunity to contribute their questions and input that we're going to then turn around and share with USDA, we are going to break into small groups, and I'm going to hand the mic to Susan to set us all up for that.
Yeah, sure. So there's so much wisdom and knowledge within this group. All the firing off in the chat box is just one example of that. So wanted to create some space for us to just do some group think and kind of surfacing some of the challenges to this, things that we need to be anticipating, what kind of additional resources we might need to be bringing in. What are some of the implications around racial equity and thinking about like how we can make sure that this program really meets intended outcomes in terms of really supporting both farmer economic viability and getting food to people who are in need in vulnerable frontline communities right now. So we want to dig into some of those questions. So this Wallace Center team is going to be facilitating each of the groups. We could do 6 groups. There's about 110 of us, so 15 or so folks in each group. Andrew's getting us set up. So Andrew, let me know when you're ready to kind of send us out. What you'll need to do is press join the breakout group, and then we'll each head into those places, and the facilitator will be asking for a volunteer note taker if you're up for that. So I think that's basically the idea here. Andrew, are we ready?
The rooms are ready. We're going till 3:45.
Yeah, we
right?
have.
So
we have about 20 minutes
okay.
for breakout.
All right, so I'll open those up. Everyone should see a pop-up asking you to join the room.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, folks that are not assigned, I'm adding you to rooms as we speak.
Our farmers and our distributors, and then also our communities. So having that lens, and Margaret from Flint was very much wanting to be a part of this. If the Wallace Center has further conversation, she's very interested in supporting. Other things that came up.
Resourceful communities.
Oh, I'm sorry, Margaret.
Conservation.
Thank you so much. Other things that came up was the pricing. Folks are really concerned because the USDA is operating on a very large commodity scale, that the pricing is not going to be beneficial to the farmers that they support. And so wanting to understand how is this going to phase down to a local foods level in a way that's not going to be harmful to folks who are producing the food. And maybe I'll ask my group, Lori or Jennifer, anyone else, is there something you'd like to mention that we had in our group? Yep. And we also took notes.
I was just going to comment again. I'm sorry, I'm beating a dead horse, but about the food safety certification, I feel like that will eliminate a lot of the smaller scale immigrant refugee farmers that we work with. So I hope that that is not a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Those issues definitely came up within my group as well, and a real call for making a demand to USDA that racial equity be a component of selection, and really making a strong demand to the agency about that, because it's completely devoid of any language right now about who it's intended to benefit anywhere within this program. It's very general. Okay, another group, Elizabeth?
Yeah, and huge shout out to Beth for taking some notes and everyone for a great conversation. We also heard a couple voices of concern around food safety and any type of regulation around grading, in hopes that quote ugly produce and grade B produce could be included in this potentially. Also, some good discussion around the need to have culturally relevant products, and that emphasizes really the efficacy of prioritizing local and regional value chain actors and creating these boxes so that they can work with their communities to create the type of food resources that can best serve their communities. And I would say another big concern that was raised was that climate change doesn't stop just because we're going through a global pandemic, and that producers are still very susceptible to climatic events that might prevent these contracts from being fulfilled. So some questions around what kind of support or insurance can be provided in the face of those potential climatic events.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Ellie?
Sure. Elizabeth, that was a good transition. We had a lot of questions about, products that are seasonally available change, demand might change, and how sort of static these things need to be. The USDA sort of broke it up into temporal chunks, but things change over time. So that was a question. There was a lot of questions in our group about who is best positioned to be the applicant, if you're a broadline distributor, or if you're a food hub, or if you're a nonprofit that maybe also does some food distribution and some food assistance. So some questions about who the ideal applicant is. And then also some good points about food hubs working together and coordinating across regions and how that might be beneficial, and if they might be able to apply together. So similar questions. And then also, yeah, food safety concerns I think were important to us.
Yeah, definitely some common threads here. John, you want to share what went up in your group?
Sure, yeah, again, a lot of common pieces. I think this issue of coordination among hubs was interesting. And then again, that lead applicant idea so that you can extend the region. The issue of scale came up in ours. Is there a preference for addressing the whole region? Will there be a bias against smaller hubs that would just do specific areas or not? So there's hopes there, but we're looking for some clarity on that. And again, there's a lot of, I think a lot of organizations are emerging into this and starting these smaller distribution programs. And will this issue of a past record with federal contracts be a barrier, or will there be some leniencies for this as we get into it? Price, I think, is continuing. Just some clarity around price, what goes in the box, who decides what goes in the box. And then the issue of supply will change across the country. Can you be competitive if you just pick a shorter time frame, or do you really need to pick the longer one? So I think just a lot of clarity on where there might be some biases or not, either intentionally or not.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot one thing, which is how will they verify that the food is local? So that was brought up on the webinar that, all about American produce and we want to make sure, but someone on our call said, how are they going to verify that? And it seems like a lot of this is up to the contractee to, do their own self-policing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I'd throw in there was, we had a little discussion around labor. If we're going to be packing a lot of boxes, where do we get the labor? Where do we get folks that are used to working with food, and maybe unemployed restaurant workers might be a good place to look, and partnering with restaurants was suggested.
And this didn't come up in a call, John, but there are questions about PPE and keeping those people that are doing this work safe as well. And how USDA is going to pay for those costs, and also if they're going to pay for the labor, if they're going to pay for the materials, if they're going to pay for overhead, and sort of what gets baked into this contract.
Mm-hmm. Annalena? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll share a lot of what you guys have said definitely came up in our discussion too, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. But two things that did come up that I haven't heard yet reflected is, how does different regions' growing seasons impact their capacity to apply and start, you know, theoretically delivering by May 15th if their growing season doesn't start until after then. So a little bit more clarity on how that will come into play. And then there was a discussion around, you know, how do we ensure that like the people who really need the food are getting the food, and that how do we ensure that the farmers who need the income are getting that. And then the last point was just a suggestion to, in the RFP, to really consider the economic impact and benefit of participating in this program to your local community, your local context.
Mm-hmm. Just quickly, I'll share a couple of other things that came up in our group. Hailey raised some really good points about cash flow and how important that's going to be for anybody who's considering applying for this. We don't really know what the payment terms are going to look like from AMS yet, so if you're going to need to front that money. Also, some good points about reaching out to farmers right now and seeing who's got what, and start your farmer engagement immediately, as well as getting the SAM, the SAM number, if you don't already have one of those, which is a requirement in order to have a federal contract. So those were a couple of things that people could jump on right now in between, you know, now and next Friday. And maybe I'll just ask, Hailey, was there anything or others that were in my group that were important points that we should share? Okay, and curious if there were other like immediate next steps, things that people should be anticipating or doing right now, maybe in the days before this RFP comes out. Any suggestions that came up in the other groups?
I'll highlight quickly just a resource that was shared from Chris. Thank you for that. We were lamenting the perceived daunting nature of government contracting. And Sue from PA, Pennsylvania, said that it doesn't necessarily have to be so daunting. Chris shared that procurement technical assistance centers often offer free individual help to businesses on government contracting, and included a link there with some more resources.
Great. And Jennifer added a note here about really engaging your nonprofit partners and getting on those relationships and partnerships now.
Mm-hmm. Ursula gave us a nice resource for food safety handling under government contracts, and I reposted it there in the chat box. It's an FDA link.
Great, thank you.
We echoed a lot of the need for some technical assistance and training on how to be successful with this type of application.
Any other immediate next steps? There was at the end of our conversation thinking about finding a way for us to either map out or communicate who is intending to apply in which communities, so that maybe there's an opportunity for coordination and partnership. So not really sure what that might look like, but that might be something that the Wallace Center can create a venue for.
Another thing that might be useful, and I'd like to get feedback on it, is if Wallace Center was to generate almost a model proposal or application that would provide some guidance on how to respond to some of these stock questions like capacity and such, with a disclaimer that, you know, we have never secured a federal contract ourselves to do this actual work, but if we could source it from folks, it might be useful for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the context of the cash flows, one of the things we talked about is the potential for lining up social finance or CDFI partners to help bridge some of the receivables on the USDA payment side. So that way we can make sure that we actually keep our farmers paid in timely ways and keep our employees paid while we're doing this work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Elizabeth to wrap us up.
Sure. Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, everyone. This was a really incredible conversation, and everyone really jumped right in and was sharing a lot of ideas. And I feel like through this has already helped, for me at least, to help make more sense of this and brought to light a whole bunch of resources and questions and ideas. This can feel daunting. This is happening very quickly and in real time, but I'd encourage you to look around this digital room and just take stock that there is an immense amount of knowledge and grit and resources and idea and brilliance in this community, and that we can be working together in the weeks and months to come to figure this out collectively. We've got a lot of notes, a lot of questions that we captured. We're going to be sharing that out with everyone, and we'll also post this recording. I know we scheduled this very, very quickly. A lot of folks couldn't make it, so we'll share it out and encourage you to share these notes, your questions and ideas, and this recording out with your community. And in the meantime, please do add your thoughts and questions to that Google Doc that we shared. Again, we'll be sharing that out with everyone that can't make it. And as we learn more and try to mobilize quickly around figuring this out and mobilizing around this, we'll be keeping you all updated. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.